told someone that I was a vegetarian and I raised meat sheep, it didn't matter who that person was. They would get a very confused look on their face, and they would say, why on earth would a vegetarian raise meat sheep? And I loved that question, because I would say, I know it's really weird, it doesn't make any sense at all, but the reason I raise meat sheep is because God gave them to me, and I know He wants me to raise them. And then if that person was willing to listen, I could go on to tell them a whole bunch of different stories about how God had blessed and led me with raising these sheep. Now, and also I learned a great deal through raising sheep about God's relationship with us as our good shepherd, and we are His sheep. I learned a lot about that. I grew up in the country in British Columbia, Canada, and lived on a large property at the end of a very long dirt road. Beautiful place, but it wasn't much of a farm, and I always wanted to be a farmer. So I tried raising a few different types of livestock. I tried market gardening. Nothing was really quite the right fit for me. And in 2012, in September of 2012, I met a friend in town, and she said, hey, I've got 2 sheep that I'd like to find a good home for. Would you be interested in taking them? And I said, well, thanks for the offer, but I really don't have any money. I really can't afford them. And she said, oh no, you don't understand. I'll give them to you for free. Now at the time, I was the sort of person that if anybody offered me an animal for free, I would say, yes, absolutely, I'll take it. The more the merrier, sure. But I hesitated when she offered me those sheep, because I knew that they were not wool sheep. They didn't produce wool. Their only purpose was to produce meat lambs. And I was a vegetarian. I didn't know if I could stand to raise lambs for meat. So I said, well, I'll think about it, I'll pray about it, I'll talk to my mom and my brother about it, because I share a house with them, and I'll get back to you. And as I was driving home that day from town, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, why on earth would God want me to raise meat sheep? I am a Seventh-day Adventist vegetarian. This just doesn't make any sense. And I had grown up in the Seventh-day Adventist church. I had grown up believing in God and trying my best to follow Him, but at the same time, I still wasn't the best Christian, and it took me a long time to make a decision to follow God and give my life to Him. And it wasn't until in my late 20s when I was baptized. And you know, your relationship with God, it's a journey, it's not a destination, and you're always learning new things. And one thing I needed to learn a lot about at that point was prayer. And my prayers at that point in time went something like this. God, I would like, dear God, thank you for everything. I would like this, this, and this in that order. If you could do that, that would be great, please. Thank you. In Jesus' name. Oh, as an afterthought, if it is your will, but please make it happen. Amen. And that's not really how God works. Sometimes I got the things I prayed for. A lot of the times I didn't. But I didn't quite understand how to pray properly. And as I was driving home from town that day, and I was not sure whether I should get these sheep or not, I prayed a different prayer. And I said, God, if you want me to get those sheep, I need a really obvious answer. I need to know for sure. A black or white answer, no gray, no questionableness. I need to know for sure. Do you want me to get those sheep or not? And by the time I got home, I was pretty sure I wasn't going to get the sheep. It just didn't make any sense to me. But I'd prayed about it, so when I got home, I told my mom about the possibility of me getting these sheep. And she was not really in favor of it, not really against it, and I thought, yeah, I'm not getting the sheep. Problem solved. And then my brother came home. And now you have to understand, my brother, whenever I would get a new animal, he'd look at the new animal, and he'd look at me. And he'd say, why on earth did you get that? So I was feeling pretty confident. And I said, so this friend of ours offered me her 2 sheep free, but I don't think I'm going to get them. And he said, why not? I said, what? And he said, why not? You should get them. Turn this place into a real farm. And I thought, oh boy, God, that was an obvious answer. But I love the story of Gideon. You know how Gideon, when he was told to do something by God, he wanted to be absolutely certain that that message came from God. And so he put out a fleece to test whether it was a message from God, whether it was true. And he did that twice. So I did something similar. I said, okay, God, that was a really obvious answer, my brother saying yes, but I'm not convinced. So if you want me to get these sheep, you have to make it happen. I need it to be really obvious. If there's any problem to me getting the sheep, then I'm not going to get them. I'll know that the answer is no. I got the sheep. Not only did God work it out for me to get the sheep, my brother even loaned me his truck. And it was his precious truck. He'd never loaned it to me before, ever. He loaned me the truck to go get the sheep. So now I had these 2 sheep that I wasn't sure if I really wanted to raise sheep or not. Both the sheep were ewes. So a ewe is a female sheep, a ram is a male sheep, and a lamb in Canada is considered to be a baby sheep up until it's a year old. These were 2 ewes. And I thought, well, I'm gonna keep this things really small scale. I'm not gonna, usually when I got animals, I would get a lot of animals, or I'd want to get a lot of animals. And this time I said, God, I'm gonna stay small scale. I'm just gonna have these 2 sheep, that's it. I'll get them bred, I'll see if I can stand raising sheep, and then maybe I'll get some more, but that's it. I'm not going crazy on this. So I went looking for a ram to breed my ewes with. And I couldn't find one to rent, so I had to buy one, and I found one. And if I was going to farm sheep, he was a perfect fit. He was exactly what I wanted. And he was a good price, and I didn't have very much money, so he was a really good price. After I had agreed to buy him, his owner called me up, and she said, hey, I want to help you get started in the sheep industry. I've got these 2 older ewes that I'd like to find a good home for. Would you be interested in them? And I said, well, thanks, but I really don't have any more money. I can't afford to buy them. And she said, oh no, you don't understand. I'll give them to you for free if you only give me a lamb back from each of them when they lamb. And I thought, God, small scale, remember? I was only going to have 2 sheep. Now you're giving me a ram and 2 ewes. I don't know about this. But again, I wasn't sure what I should do, right? So I prayed a different prayer, and I said, okay, if you want me to get them, you need to make it work out. And if you don't want me to get them, don't let it work out. I got the sheep. Not only did I get the sheep, not only did God work it out for me to get the sheep, the lady who owned them delivered them for free. And she lives about 45 minutes drive away from where I lived. So that was a really big help for me. And again, I thought, I'm going to stay small. I'm not getting any more sheep. That's it. I had 4 ewes and 1 ram. That's it. And incidentally, these 2 ewes that she had given me, they were exactly the same type of sheep as the ones I already had. They were not wool sheep. They were a type of shedding sheep. Now, I'd had sheep for a few weeks by this point, and I started to realize I rather liked having sheep. They were very enjoyable creatures. Before I got sheep, I used to think a sheep is a sheep is a sheep. They're all the same, but they're not. They have individual personalities and characteristics and attitudes, and some are very loving and some are kind of standoffish, and just all sorts of differences. And I really began to enjoy raising sheep. I was having fun. And about when I first got the first 2 sheep, actually, I started looking for a guard animal for my sheep. Now, like I said, I lived in the country in British Columbia. Behind our property, there are thousands of hectares of government-owned land. It's wilderness, basically, very heavily forested, and lots of wild predators. There are black bears, grizzly bears, wolves, coyotes, mountain lions, bobcat, lynx, just loads of animals. And I knew that my sheep were in a lot of danger constantly. So I locked them in a shed at night to try to keep them safe, and then during the day they'd be out in a pen which was near the house. But still, I knew that they were still in danger, so I needed to get an animal to guard them. And there are lots of different animals that are used to guard sheep across the world, but the most effective are livestock guardian dogs. And they are breeds of dogs that have been bred for centuries to bond very, very strongly to the animals that they're kept with and to guard them to the death if need be. They will fight to the death to save their animals. So I started looking online to try to find a dog that would work for my sheep. And I had a list of criteria that I needed the dog to fit. I needed it to be bonded to sheep, and I needed it to be a female because I had a male dog who didn't get along with other male dogs, and all these different things, and I needed it to be cheap. That was a really tough one because guard dogs that are trained to guard sell for $800, $1,000, sometimes more than that, and I had very, very little money. I could not afford an expensive dog. And so I looked and looked and looked, and I couldn't find anything. Every time I'd find a dog that seemed to fit, it would be sold, or it was too far away for me to go get it. And I couldn't find anything. Every dog I found, every puppy, whatever, it did not fit what I needed for a dog. And I was getting really frustrated. And finally I said, God, you gave me these sheep. It was your idea, not mine. It was your idea. So if you're not going to provide a dog, I need you to keep the sheep safe. And you know what? He did. He really did. There are so many predators that could have killed all my sheep in one day, and nothing touched them. They were 100% safe. God kept them safe. But in December of that year, I found an ad for a dog that fit all my criteria. And she was cheap. She was extremely cheap. And I called up the owner and I said, I'm really interested in your dog. I'd really like to get her, but I can't come for another week because where they lived was 4 hours drive away. And I said, can you hold her for me? I'll definitely take her. And the woman said, no, I'm not going to hold her for anybody. It's first come, first serve. I said, okay, well, I'll call you in a week. And I prayed about it and I said, God, if you want me to get that dog, then make her available in a week. But I thought, there's no way. At that price, that quality of dog, she's not going to be there. It's just not going to happen. She was available in a week, and I got the dog. And she was so bonded to sheep that when we left the farm with her in the back of my car, she cried. She wailed, she moaned. I've never heard a dog cry before. The people in the car, including myself, were almost in tears. She was so upset that we were taking her away from her family, her sheep. But when we got to my house and she saw my sheep, she was overjoyed. She was so excited to have sheep to take care of again. And my sheep were so much more relaxed now that they had a dog to guard them because they knew they were safer, that they had this dog. So that was in December. In January, I got a call from a friend, and she said, we know this older man, he's getting up in years, and he's got these 2 sheep that he would like to find a good home for. And I said, oh, well, thanks for thinking of me, but I really don't have the money for more sheep. And she said, oh no, you don't understand. They're free to a good home. I thought, okay. I thought maybe God's plans for me are a little bigger than my plans. So I said, okay, God, I'll go have a look at the sheep. If I see any reason, any problem, why I shouldn't get them, then I'll know I'm not supposed to get them. But otherwise, just give me a really obvious answer whether I should get these sheep or not. So I went to look at them, and they were precisely the same kind of sheep as what I already had. And there was one ram and one ewe. So again, I prayed, okay, God, if you want me to get them, make it happen. I got the sheep. And I really, really started to think maybe I really needed to change my plans, because I think God wants bigger things for me than just having 3 or 4 sheep. And from that point on, for the next several years, I basically felt like I was running to keep up with God, because he just made things move so quickly. I really like the verse in Jeremiah 29, verse 11. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Shortly after I got that ram and that ewe, lambing season began. And I absolutely fell in love with raising sheep. I love lambs. I love lambing season. Lambs are so much fun. Put a smile on your face so easily. I just loved it. And if I had said no to God when he told me to get those first 2 sheep, I would have missed out on that. I would have missed out on all that joy of raising sheep. And raising sheep, farming sheep, I think I would be safe to say it has been the most fulfilling job I have ever done. Taking care of innocent lambs and I don't know how to describe it, but being a shepherd is the best job I have ever done. When I realized God's plans were bigger than my plans, I started thinking I should probably get a herding dog, because I'm going to need to move my sheep around, and sometimes a bucket of oats doesn't quite cut it for getting the sheep to go where you want them to. So I started looking for a border collie, and border collies are really expensive. If you buy one that has any talent, even if it's not trained, it's usually $600 for a puppy, and then you have to train it. And I didn't have very much money at all. So I was praying about it, asking God, if you want me to have a herding dog, then please provide the right one. And I found this ad for this dog who was available, but she was located about 10 hours drive away from my place. That's a long ways, and I couldn't afford to take time off work just to drive there to see her. Even, maybe she wouldn't even work, and she wasn't trained. She was untrained, but had a lot of talent. So I was praying about it, and I talked to her owner on the phone, and I said, what's the price for her? And she said, well, she's free to the right home. I thought, okay, well, that's one thing in her favor for sure. And I said, well, I'm going to have to try to figure out how to get there to have a look at her and hopefully pick her up. And I'd gotten off the phone and I was thinking about this, and my friend, who had mentioned the ad for this dog to me in the first place, she called me up and she said, you're not going to believe this. I have a friend driving here from that place, it was Medicine Hat, Alberta. She said, I have a friend driving here from Medicine Hat in 2 days' time, and she can bring the dog if the dog's owner is okay with that. So I called up the dog's owner again and I said, I realize this is a difficult thing to ask you because you want her to go to a good home and you haven't met me, but would you be willing to hand her off to someone else to deliver to me? And she thought about it and she said, I'm a Christian and I've been praying about this and I feel that you are the best home for that dog, and so I would be okay with that. So 2 days later, I got a free dog delivered to me for free, and that dog was absolutely spectacular. She was so talented as a herding dog. It was incredible. She should have sold for, $1,000, and I got this dog for free. It just blew me away, how God worked that out. Another thing that God did for me later that year was I was able to get another livestock guardian dog, because I knew one guard dog, while she was really a good guard dog, she would be no match against a pack of wolves. And so I'd been looking for another dog. I found another dog who was a very cheap price. And again, it worked out for her to be delivered to me. God just worked it out amazingly for me to have everything I needed to farm more sheep. I also, during the next few years, I was building fences. My two brothers, older brothers, they helped me build a barn, which was a crazy undertaking for me because I've never built a barn before. That was quite a learning experience. And through all this, I never had very much money. But God always gave me money when I needed it for a project. There was always money to buy wire when I needed it. There was always money to help build the barn when I needed it. And some of the barn siding was free. It was just amazing how God worked it all out. My brother who'd loaned me his truck, he eventually gave me that truck for free so that I could farm and use it for hauling hay and sheep and all that. Oh, it was just incredible. I love the verse, most of you would know it, Psalm 23, verse 1, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." At all. You know, he provides everything we need when we ask him for it. Now, I had mentioned I was a vegetarian and I didn't know if I could stand to sell lambs for meat. But after that first year, I realized I could. I didn't like it. I didn't like selling lambs for meat at all. I never did. I still don't. But I could do it. I just made sure every year that I had at least one pet lamb. And then I gave all the love that I would love to give to all the lambs. I gave it all to that lamb. And it worked. But I have to say there was one thing that I really learned from selling lambs for meat. And that is, it made me long for heaven more than anything I've ever done before. You know, when you encounter problems in this world, when you have to deal with death and suffering, it makes you want heaven. It makes you want a place where there is no death and no pain. And an innocent lamb doesn't have to die for somebody to eat it. I've never wanted to go to heaven so much before in all my life. Now, remember how I said I was going to stay small? I was only going to have 2 sheep to begin with. In 3 years, if I counted all the sheep and all the lambs, I had 76 sheep. I had bought a few more along the way, and then they had a lot of lambs. So yeah, I had 76 sheep, which I realize by most standards is not very much. But compared to what I wanted to start with just 2 sheep, it was a lot. God's plans were a lot bigger than mine were. And if I had said no in the beginning, if I had refused to follow God's leading, I would have missed out on all those blessings. Now, I don't want to give you the wrong idea. It was not all butterflies and roses farming sheep. In fact, I had loads of problems. Lots and lots and lots of problems. It was a very steep learning curve farming sheep. I did lose a few sheep, a few lambs over the years, not very many, but a few. It happens when you're raising livestock. And it was various problems that happened. And I encountered a lot of different health issues with my sheep. And I think over the years that I farmed sheep, I only had the same problem happen twice. It was always a different problem. And the first time it happened, the first time I had a problem, I thought, oh, that's it. God doesn't want me to farm sheep anymore. Okay, I'm fine with that. But then he provided the solution. So, okay, I guess I'm still farming sheep then. The next time a problem happened, I thought, that's it. I'm not farming sheep anymore. God wants me to quit. But then he provided the solution. So I thought, okay, all right. And after a few times, I began to realize that It wasn't God trying to tell me he didn't want me to farm sheep anymore. It was Satan trying to talk me out of following God. He was trying to make me discouraged and to not trust that God was leading me in this. And so after a while, when I'd run into a problem, my first reaction would be, okay, God, now what? What do you want me to do now? What's the solution this time? What do you want me to learn from this experience? I had so many health problems, in fact, with my sheep that when I told other sheep farmers that I was friends with or asked them about some of these problems, they'd be like, what? We've never encountered that. Why do you have so many problems with your sheep anyway? But like I said, it was Satan trying to dissuade me from following God. One of the problems that I encountered was with my guard dogs. The first guard dog, her name was Debbie, and when I was training my border collie, her name was Geordie. When I was training Geordie to herd the sheep, if you've ever seen a herding dog learning to herd, it's rather chaotic. They just chase sheep randomly and they're kind of uncontrolled to begin with. And Debbie would sit back and she'd just sit there and watch. And then a few days later, I went down to check on the sheep, and one of the lambs had a cut on its leg. Not a really bad cut, it was just a little cut. But I thought, that's odd. So I doctored it up, and it healed, and then a couple days later, it had a cut on the same leg again. And I thought, okay, it probably didn't scrape it on the fence a second time. Something's going on here. I finally figured out it was Debbie. She had been, prior to this, she'd never touched a sheep. She was very respectful of the sheep, but she had been watching Geordie chase the sheep in herding them, and she thought, that must be kind of fun. I want to try that too. And so when I wasn't there, she was playing with the lambs. And so I tried all sorts of different things to stop her from messing with the sheep. I put a drag on her collar. It was like this pole that hung from her collar to slow her down so she couldn't run after the sheep. I tried chaining her up sometimes. I tried all sorts of different things to try to stop this dog from messing with the sheep. And it kind of sort of worked, but it didn't really solve the problem. And when I got my second guardian dog, her name was Buffy, she learned how to chase sheep from Debbie. And so I was constantly trying to get these dogs to leave the sheep alone and do their job and guard the sheep. And I was really getting frustrated, and I didn't realize how long this had been going on for until I was looking through my calendar and realized it had been going on for months. I had been doing the same thing for months, expecting different results. I think that's the definition of insanity. So I said, okay, God, I realize you gave me these dogs, and I know you gave them to me for a purpose, but I think that purpose is used up now. I think I need better dogs, new dogs. So I said, God, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find 2 replacement dogs, and then I'm going to sell these dogs to somebody else. They might work better for somebody else. And so I started looking online for 2 replacement dogs. Now, normally online, there are lots of ads for livestock guardian dogs or puppies or whatever. There was absolutely nothing available. In all of British Columbia and all of Alberta, there were no guard dogs for sale. Nothing. So I saw that and I said, oh, fine. Okay, God. I get it. You want me to keep these 2 dogs, but I said, you've got to do something about this problem of them chasing sheep. I can't deal with this any longer. I'm just about ready to pull my hair out. I need you to solve this problem for me. I should have just prayed that in the first place. I really should have, because I'm sure he could have solved the problem. Right about this time, I had, my barn was not completely finished yet, and I had my hay stored in the back end of the barn. And we have wild elk, herds of wild elk that live in that area, and they started coming and eating my hay. And a herd of wild elk can eat an awful lot of hay in one night, so this was a big problem. And the guard dogs wouldn't chase them away because they didn't feel they were a threat to the sheep. So I took Geordie, my border collie, and I chained her up next to the hay, and she barked at the elk and kept them away from the hay, so it was a great solution. A few days after I had her chained up there, I was in the house and I heard Geordie yipping like mad, like she was really excited. And I looked out the window and the guard dogs were chasing the sheep. So I went racing out there and I bawled them out. Boy, those dogs got in a lot of trouble. I chained them up. They knew they'd been bad dogs. And I left them chained up for a while and then I let them loose again. The next day, the same thing happened. Heard Geordie yipping, look out, dogs are chasing the sheep. I went running out and bawled them out. I think I did that once more. Those guard dogs never chased a sheep again. You see, God solved my problem with the dogs chasing the sheep. He solved it in a way I wouldn't have expected, with the elk eating my hay, right? But he solved the problem for me, and I should have asked him for that in the first place. In the autumn of 2015, I came home from work one night and went out to check on my sheep, and it was dark, it was quite late. And when I got out to the sheep pens, there were dead sheep lying all over the pens, and there were two strange dogs in there with them. They had killed a whole bunch of sheep, not all of them, but a whole bunch of them. They had injured a whole bunch. And I caught the dogs, I chained them up. One of them had a phone number on its collar, so I called the owner and talked to him about what had happened. And tried to deal with the problems with the sheep. I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated. I had known those sheep personally, you know, they were my friends. I had been trying to take care of them the best I possibly could for years, to give them the best life I could, and there was nothing I could have done to prevent that attack from happening. There was absolutely nothing I could have done. And you know, I knew those sheep by name. I knew them so well, and they'd been killed. And to see how they had suffered and died was just gut-wrenching. It was horrible. Long story short, the dogs had belonged to a couple who had just broken up. The wife had left her husband, and she'd left the dogs with the husband. And he had not really been taking care of them very well, and so they'd been running. They had come quite a few kilometers to get to my place. When my brother got home that night and he saw the dogs, I told him what had happened. He said, "Do you want me to shoot them?" In Canada, it's the law. If you have somebody's dogs harassing your stock, you can shoot them. And I said, well, no, I'd rather not shoot them. I realized they're just being dogs. You know, they were just doing what came naturally. It was the owner's fault that they were there in the first place. They shouldn't have been running. One thing that confused me when the dogs attacked my sheep was, why did my livestock guardian dogs let them into the pens? And I didn't actually find out for a few weeks until after it had happened, but my neighbor told me that those two stray dogs had been hanging out in that area for about 2 weeks. And I suspect, although I don't know for sure, I suspect that my livestock guardian dogs got so used to seeing those other stray dogs hanging around that they started to think of them as friends and let them into the sheep pens. And I think that's probably what happened. I'll never really know until I get to heaven. So I kept the dogs chained up, and I talked to the husband and I talked to the wife, and the husband didn't seem to understand that it was his fault that it had happened. But the wife, when I talked to her, she was completely apologetic. She said, "I am so sorry this happened. I am so sorry. I feel completely responsible." And she said, "I'll pay whatever you think is fair for the sheep that were killed and injured and all that. I'll pay. I feel so responsible." And so in the end, I gave her the dogs back with the promise that she would never let them run again and never have a chance to kill stock again, because I knew it would happen again to somebody else's animals. And she paid me in full for what I figured it would cost to buy replacement sheep, and cost for fuel to get them, and veterinary supplies for the one injured sheep that I was able to save, and all of that. But I was so depressed after that. I was so devastated. And the biggest thing, even after I'd given the dogs back to her and gotten the money, the biggest thing that bugged me was why? Why had God let this happen to me? You know, he had blessed my sheep farming so incredibly up to that point. So incredibly. Why had he let this happen to me? Why? Was it some horrific sin that I had committed that this was punishment for? Was it something I should have done and I didn't do? Was I supposed to learn something major from this? Because all the other experiences I learned a lot from. What was it? And I felt that it wasn't from any sin that I had committed. I felt that it wasn't something that I should have done and I didn't. I did feel that God still wanted me to farm sheep. I felt that it wasn't that he wanted me to stop, but I couldn't find the solution. Like, why had this happened? And I was praying and praying and praying, God, please show me why. What am I supposed to learn? Why did this happen? And this feeling of not understanding why went on for about 2 weeks. And it felt almost like God had stopped talking to me. Not necessarily that I was, I don't know, being bad or anything like that, and he was not talking to me because of that, but the answer wasn't coming. And that's a horrible feeling when you want an answer and God's not giving it to you, you know? And so I was praying and praying and praying, and after 2 weeks or so, I was talking with a good friend of mine, and I said, you know, I just can't get past this. I just don't understand why this is happening, why this happened. And she said to me, and afterwards, she and I both agreed that it was not so much her words, it was God giving her the words to tell me this. She said, you know, sometimes bad things happen to us, not for our own benefit, but for the benefit of others. She said, when you, after the dogs had killed your sheep and you were talking with the owners, you could have been screaming and yelling at them and swearing at them and taking them to court and charging them an exorbitant amount of money for emotional damage or whatever. You know, you could have done all sorts of different things like that. But she said you were able to stay calm and treat them nicely. And I was thinking about that, and when I first met that woman that I gave the dogs back to, when I first met her, and she got out of her car, she looked like she'd been crying. You know, she just split up with her husband 2 weeks earlier. She'd left her kids with him. You know, her life had been shattered, and then she gets a call that her dogs have killed somebody's sheep. You know, she was having a pretty rough time. I don't like hugging. I walked up to her and gave her a hug. I felt impressed that she needed it more than I did. So when I was thinking about what my friend said, and my friend said, you know, because you were able to show mercy to the dogs and not shoot them, and mercy to the woman and give the dogs back to her, perhaps she saw a little bit of Jesus and his love for us in that. You know, maybe it was for her benefit that this happened. I hope that's the case. But also since that time, I've realized that this experience has given me the ability to share a more balanced story. You know, if I told you that God had just blessed left, right, and center my sheep farming, nothing bad ever happened, everything just went tickety-boo, then you'd go, well, yeah, but that's not my life, right? But the truth is, even when bad things happen to us, God is there with us. He is still there, and he will still help us through, no matter what problems we run into, he's still going to be there with us and help us through them. Now, and after I talked with my friend about that, I finally had peace about the why. You know, I understood. Now, when the dogs attacked my sheep, they killed 3 good ewes, and they killed my only ram. And it was almost breeding season. I needed those animals, so I had to get replacement stock. And it's really hard to find good quality sheep in that area. Not very many sheep farmers live in that part of British Columbia. And when they do, they're often just hobby farmers and they don't have very good sheep. So I was a little worried about finding replacement animals. And that ram, while he wasn't exactly perfect, he was the best I could find when I was looking for a ram to buy. This was a different ram than the first one that I mentioned. And this ram was half Dorper, which is a breed of sheep that I really wanted to have. I really wanted to have a purebred Dorper ram, but I couldn't afford one. They're very expensive. So I had this half Dorper. It was kind of okay, but not that great. And when when the dog attack happened, I shared with a group on Facebook what had happened, and I got a lot of good advice from other sheep farmers. And I had a couple people contact me through there and say, when you're looking for replacement sheep, we have some for sale. I was able to buy 3 replacement ewes. Remember, I lost 3 good ewes. I was able to buy 3 ewes. That's all. That's actually all that was available, was 3 ewes. And they were better quality than the sheep I had lost. And they were cheaper. They were $90 cheaper per ewe than I thought I was going to have to pay to buy replacement stock. A ram. I got 2 rams, not just 1 ram. 1 ram was 3/4 Dorper and way better quality than the ram I had lost, and he was cheaper than the ram I had lost. The second ram was a purebred registered Dorper, and he was cheaper than the ram I had lost, and way better than the ram I had lost. So in the end, I came out with better sheep and more money because everything cost me less. Even the fuel to get the replacement sheep cost less than I had expected. I came out with more money than I had before. You know in the Bible, the story of Job, how it says God blessed him more in the end than he had in the beginning? It's true. I know it's true because it happened to me. It was incredible. Romans 8 verse 28 says, and we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. And I felt with the sheep farming that I was called according to his purpose. He wanted me doing that. Now, after I started sheep farming and God was giving me all these different blessings and answers to prayer, I started getting the very strong impression that I needed to share my stories with other people. And I couldn't stand the thought of standing up in front of other people. So I put it off, I procrastinated, and I said, maybe someday, God, someday I'll do that, yep. But then one day I was reading this book on stewardship. And I got to this one sentence, and I never finished the book. I read that one sentence over and over and over again. It said, I am a steward of the testimony God has given me to share. And that applies to every single one of us. I am a steward of the testimony God has given me to share. And I said, okay, God, okay, I'll do it. I'll share. If you provide the opportunity, I will share. A few weeks later, I was scheduled to share my story at our local church. And the night before, I was woken up at 1:30 in the morning by my livestock guardian dogs barking like crazy out at the sheep pens. And I could tell they were right with the sheep. There was a predator, a very dangerous predator out there. I don't know whether it was wolves or a mountain lion or what, but it was very close to the sheep because the dogs were right there. And I lay there in bed and I thought, oh great, I'm gonna have to get up, go out there, help the dogs scare away whatever it is so that the dogs will be safe as well as the sheep. Then when I come back in, I'm going to be so energized and have so much adrenaline, I'm not going to be able to sleep for quite a while. And then I'm going to wake up groggy and not really all that with it. And I have to share my story tomorrow at church. Ah, what am I going to do? And then I thought, wait a second. This is Satan trying to mess with me so that I won't share my story tomorrow at church, or so it won't be effective. I won't do a good job of it. And so as I lay there in bed, I said, God, I am going to trust you to deal with this problem. I'm going to stay in bed. You made that predator. You control it. You are in complete control of everything. You can deal with this problem, and I'm going to trust that you will do it. And I kept praying like this. And shortly after I started praying, I could tell that the predator started moving because the dog's barking started moving, and they gradually moved further and further away from the sheep until by the time I finished praying, it was silent. The dogs were not barking at all. The danger was gone after about 2 minutes or so. And Psalm 91 verse 5 says, "You shall not be afraid of the terror by night." And it's totally true. You know, we need to trust God no matter what. And I have to say, you know, all the problems I ran into with sheep farming, they brought me so much closer to God because I had to depend on Him. I didn't have the solutions. I didn't know what was coming next. And He did. I had to depend on Him every step of the way, more than any other time in my life. It was amazing. And what really, really blows me away to this day is that the God who made the entire universe, He made everything. He cares about every tiny, insignificant little detail of our lives. He knew that by giving me my first 2 sheep, that I would draw closer to Him. He knew that I would love raising sheep. I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all. He knew it. And He cared about every little detail along the way and provided solutions and direction all the time. And that's really amazing that a God that big loves every single one of us that much. And just like He had big plans for me with my sheep farming, He has big plans for us too. Big plans. And it's never a good idea to say no to God. If He tells you to do something, you better do it. You might miss out on an awful lot if you don't. Sometimes, actually all the time, doing what He tells us to do involves stepping out of our comfort zone. I know lots about that, but it's still really, really worth it. And that is my story for this time, but there's an exciting continuation to come soon.